So you overshot your RPE for a set, whether it's a top set or a straight set, it's not ideal, but without overreacting, what do you do now? If you're new here, this is the Strong Ambitions channel. My name is Cheung and I am a powerlifting coach. And in this channel, we talk about all things powerlifting. So in this video, I'm going to give you a complete protocol for various situations you may find yourself in when it comes to overshooting your RPE. So you know exactly what to do without trying to guess. So when it comes to overshooting your RPEs, there are going to be consequences that you do not want. And if you haven't already seen my video, go check it out here where I talk about this in a little bit more detail. But back to the main topic, you need to determine two things. First thing is, what is the extent of the overshooting? And the second thing is, what is the context of the rest of the training program? So when it comes to the context of the overshooting, what we are referring to is whether it was a single or multi-rep set, and to how much did you overshoot relative to what was being prescribed in the program. And when it comes to the rest of the program, what you need to look out for is whether there are more sets to perform after the set that you've overshot. And in the case that you do have more sets to perform, to what extent are those sets dependent on the set that you've just overshot? So are they a fixed load prescription, i.e. X amount of kilos? Are they a percentage of your top set, so X% of your top set? Or are they just repeated sets of your top set? Depending on what the actual situation is, you may need to respond in a very specific way. The first thing that you need to do is to not panic. I've seen a lot of experienced lifters catastrophize over overshooting, but what you'll realize if you adopt a growth mindset is that this is really just a learning experience. Second thing is, if you are someone who overshoots frequently and you know who you are, then you probably need to think about revising your warm-up routine and process for deciding what weight that you are going to hit for your top set RPE. If you haven't already, don't miss out this video where I talk about how to prevent overshooting. Now let's go through the actual scenarios. So in the first scenario, if it's a multi-rep set, for example, if it's 5 reps at RPE 8 and you went too heavy, but you cut off the set, leaving it at the prescribed RPE, so you ended up hitting say 4 reps instead of 5 reps at RPE 8. Continue as usual if it's a fixed load in your back off sets. So from a stress standpoint, it's not too dissimilar enough for it to warrant any changes in your subsequent sets. And if you have dependent back offs, i.e. it's X percentage off of your top set, what you would need to do is to calculate what would have been the ideal weight at the prescribed RPE and make your back off sets be a percentage of that hypothetical weight. As a rule of thumb, a unit RPE for many people is going to be about 2.5% for those who do not have an individualized RPE chart. If there are no back offs, then you just need to continue your training session as normal. But what you do need to do is you probably need to revise your warm-up process and decision-making process on how you get to decide what load you are going to put on a bar when it comes to deciding your top set. So in the second scenario, you have a top set RPE where you've actually overshot the RPE and you have dependent back offs. If it's only a mild overshoot, so if you overshoot by 0.1 or 1 RPE, make sure that you base your back offs on what would have been the correct RPE. If you end up overshooting by a lot and even potentially towards the RPE 10 range, not only should you base your back offs on what would have been hypothetically your correct RPE, you may want to even consider reducing your back off load by maybe 1 or 2%, especially if you have quite a few back off sets to perform afterwards. And if you do have a coach, it's probably worth discussing with your coach what they would prefer you to do, because they may potentially implement an RPE cap on your back off sets. And RPE caps are pretty useful tools to help make sure that the training session doesn't become excessively fatiguing, which may spill over to your subsequent sessions. So in the third scenario, you have a top set RPE where you actually overshoot the RPE and you have independent back offs. So you may have a fixed load prescription or you may have an alternative prescription that is not based on the top set. If it's a mild overshoot, so you overshoot by 0.1 or 1 RPE, or if you overshoot to a moderate RPE like 7 instead of hitting RPE 5, or if your back offs are easy, then what you would do is just to continue as usual. Do not make any other changes. If it's a major overshoot by 2 or more RPEs, or you end up hitting in the RPE 10 range, you may want to consider reducing your back off sets ever so slightly, but this really depends on the inherent difficulty of your back off sets relative to your own work capacity. So in the fourth scenario, scenario, this is where you overshoot your RPE for straight sets. So if you end up overshooting by 0.5 or 1 RPE, it isn't really a big deal. Just reduce the weight to what would have been the appropriate RPE and finish the rest of your straight sets at that correct weight. So if you end up overshooting by quite a lot, so by 2 or more RPEs, then what you should do with the rest of your straight sets is reduce the weight so that the average of all the RPEs work out to be similar to that of what was prescribed in your program. So for example, if you were prescribed, sets of 5 at RPE 7 and you end up hitting an RPE 9 for your first set, you may want to consider reducing the rest of the weights so that they work out to be about RPE 5 or 6. So in a fifth scenario, if you have ascending sets or ramping sets, what you do depends on what the intentions are of these ascending sets. So it depends on whether the ascending sets are a build up to a top set with subsequent backup sets, or whether the ramping sets form the volume of the training you have for that movement. So if you have ramping sets to a top set and you have backup sets as well, and you end up prematurely hitting the top set RPE, then what you need to do is refer back to the same protocol to scenario 2 and 3. If you are doing ramping sets and all of the ramping sets form all of the volume for that movement, if you prematurely hit a weight at a higher RPE, then what you should do is reduce the weight so that you end up hitting the RPE for the lower sets, so that overall at the end of the session you end up matching the stimulus that is prescribed on the program. If, however, you are performing the last set of those ramping sets and during the middle of the set you know that you are about to overshoot, the best thing to do is to probably just cut the set off at the prescribed RPE so you end up saving yourself for later sessions. So if you liked this video, you found any usefulness from this video at all, click like, subscribe and hit the bell icon and share this video to someone that might benefit from it. Otherwise, I will see you guys on the next one.